Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Matt Lateplo, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you have joined us for our next live presentation from Desert Mountain Energy, a resource company primarily focused on exploration, development, and production of helium, hydrogen, and noble gases. Please note you can submit questions in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Robert Rolfing, CEO and Executive Chairman of Desert Mountain Energy Corp, which trades on the OTCQX Best Market under the symbol DMEHF and on the TSXV under the symbol DME. Welcome, Robert.
Hey, good morning, Matt. Thank you. It's an opportunity that I don't always get to take. Normally, Don handles these, so I really enjoy getting to visit with people, and probably a lot of folks have heard Don, and they'll hear a lot of the same things. But I have a tendency to perhaps meander off on some areas that other people that I know have sent us questions in the past. So it gives me a great opportunity to try to answer some of those as I go through. As you notice in the first slide, it's just a little bit about we have over 100,000 acres of land in the Southwest, basically all located in Arizona, and we're looking to expand elsewhere. Next slide. And then slide 3. You know, the exploration and development of hydrogen, helium, noble gas properties has really been focused in Northeast Arizona. There's been, over the years, the highest percentage of helium ever found was actually in the Pinta Dome field, which is in the very northeast, central northeast part of the state of Arizona. And the entire field, people normally think of huge fields like in oil and gas, where they extend for miles and miles and miles and miles. Both Pinta Dome and the main field was comprised of 9 wells. That's it. And then you had East Navajo Springs, 2 wells and 1 well. So it's not really an expansive acreage. Helium is really hard to find, number one. It's normally found just in oil and tied up with oil and gas production in very small amounts, like 1/3 or 0.5%, if you're lucky. Sometimes it might be 1.5%, but normally it's not real high. There's a few areas where it's been tied up with natural gas, and you could have a 3.7 to a 4.1, something like that. And that's as the gas production has fallen off over time out of normal gas and oil field, so it's the helium production. You know, when we put into the production for the McCauley helium field, folks wanted to really try to understand, you know, we drilled 8 wells across an area, and we found helium in all 8 wells to varying degrees and different pressures and different formations. Mostly everything else that's been previously found is very shallow, normally above 1,100 feet. And for what we have found, we're down right on top of the Precambrian granite. So we've chosen to look deeper and in between all of the zones. And one of the things that folks have tried to understand is exactly how is helium formed. And that's one thing. It comes from the breakdown of uranium-238, thorium-252, cesium, and lithium, and how they interact. And you have to have from the breakdown of the gamma and the beta particles, and you end up with helium and also hydrogen. What we had hypothesized when I originally started working on this was looking at everywhere in the world where hydrogen and helium is found. And normally hydrogen is found accompanied by sulfur, H2S, because the majority of the places on planet Earth where you find accumulations of helium, it's usually tied up with a hydrocarbon, as I previously stated, or it's tied up with hydrogen. And hydrogen normally has a sulfur content to it. And H2S is a poisonous gas. That's getting away from being in a normal hydrocarbon environment where it's being trapped at. We're into a cleaner area with nitrogen. Now, we have looked in other areas, and we probably will in the future expand into some other areas where you can find the actual a lower amount of nitrogen. Might be in an area perhaps that wasn't really considered production or capabilities due to the high nitrogen content, but it'll still be tied up with some type of natural gas, some methane, propane, pentane, that type of stuff. So we have to work through those in each individual area. And that we're not alone in that. Folks have looked at that around the U.S. and the western part of the U.S. We've put together a world-class technical team. I'm proud of the team that we put together and how we're not a huge company, but the overall leadership of the company and the experience of it is the hands-on experience of not just theoretical, and which is so critical to finding helium and hydrogen in commercial quantities. We recently, back in March, had raised $23 million for our CapEx as planned in 2023, and we still have just under 20 of that 19.7. So we're doing very good. Next slide. Again, as previously stated, we have over 100,000 acres. Most of our acreage is tied up between state and private leases. We don't have any leases on indigenous people's land currently. We have a very small amount, less than 3,000 acres on BLM property. And so we are really focused in a specific grouping of areas. Part of the reason for that, it gives us an ability to keep our costs down. Having been in the oil business for many years, and if you look at certain areas of the country, you could easily spend $5,000 or more dollars per acre. Our average all-in cost currently is approximately $2.06 per acre. So we have a large, nice-sized land holding at very low cost, and it's very low cost to maintain that. When we built the McCauley Helium Processing Facility, this is the world's first true plant that is for helium extraction that was built to run on solar. Now, we can run on natural gas, CNG, but we designed this to run on solar. And that helps cut down on our long-term costs, and it gives us a fixed operating cost to run the plant on. We originally took the commissioning of the plant was back in January of this year, and then we finalized getting things together, starting to run it. And as such, the plant has performed the way we thought. Actually, it's performed better than we thought. We have also, as part of our financing, we have started to order plant-specific plant components that are the critical aspects of any type of these plants that have the longest lead time. So it's the same thing we did before, just trying to, even though you're not going to go into fabrication quite yet, you need to have all these things on order just to get that done. Currently, our trucking company and our drilling investments are providing us income. Trucking can go up and down on any given day, but overall, thus far this year, our trucking basically covers our G&A, which is unusual for a company our size and with what we're doing. And last year, we were also selected as for the 2023 for the OTCQX Best 50 and TSX Top 50. And those two honors are very nice to have. The management team, again, just real briefly, next slide, is going on to just myself, Don Mosher. Now, after we did the financing, we added Valerie Farley as our CFO. She is a qualified CPA and CFO. What we had previously, we had Scott Davis and his group are doing a great job for us in Canada, but to really do more here in the U.S., because that's where we are focused. And for possible uplifts later, we needed to have a U.S. CFO. And her experience with dealing with regulatory and financial reporting and auditing on public traded companies is really outstanding. So that was helpful. Marta Wasco, our Vice President of Geology, she was the former head of I should say the administrator for the Arizona Oil and Gas Commission. So we were pleased to get her because that gave us an additional hands-on for someone with actual hands-on experience in Arizona with their oil and gas. Arizona has very little oil and gas. Total number of wells drilled from statehood to now in the entire state is less than 2,000 wells. So when you compare that with some counties in Oklahoma that had 20,000 wells drilled in one county. So these are huge differences, and you constantly find yourself trying to help educate other people because they don't have huge oil and gas departments like other states. And so you also find out in the Department of Environmental Quality, there's just a lack of experience. Yeah, they have good folks, but you have to try to enlighten them and try to teach as you go. And I'll give the state credit because they have tried recently, they have tried having other regulatory agencies, like out of Texas, for example, try to hold a lot of classes to try to bring the people at DEQ and others up to speed. And that is really helpful. Next slide. And the board of directors make up, we added Weldon Stout last year. Weldon, as an independent director, had served as a district court judge, and his prior experience included a lot of oil and gas in Oklahoma. So he's someone else who is there. And we will be looking to make additional changes to the board as we get ready to go more for an uplist and prepare. Just in general, we need more fully independent directors. Currently, and when we started out, just a small company, you don't always have fully independent board. You have interlocking directors and officerships, and we're moving away from that. And we look forward to completing that very shortly. Next slide on capital structure. Currently, we have 89.8 million shares outstanding. There's options out there for additional 6.6. Warrants are currently at 2.3. Tradable warrants, there's 11,400,000. Those came out of the last financing. So those are fully tradable. So at the end of the road there, fully diluted, we would be sitting at 110,182,000. And we trade on multiple exchanges. Next slide on timeline, number 8. We just try to keep people apprised of where we're going. Timelines, when you're a smaller company, things can come and go. You have to be ready to be able to move and be in flux. It's just like in dealing with Beam Earth, our hydrogen partner. They've like many people, have found it's really tough to raise money in this current market. And they're a little bit slower than what they had hoped for. But we will still continue to do our geophysics with them. And on the subject of geophysics, as far as hydrogen, there's a lot of different newer type of geophysics which are helpful. Not necessarily spectral analysis from satellites, which is kind of the tried and true for a lot of different hydrocarbon-based research and other, even heavy metals. And so what they have found is the use of drones in doing this is a lot more cost effective. You can get it closer to the area. You can get the drone into, it's non-intrusive. You basically, when you're flying, you're mowing the grass, it's called, you're going back and forth. And that's helpful to give you an idea at a much closer to Earth level instead of 23,500 miles on a geosynchronous orbit. So you can also use that to peel away if you're in an area that has a lot of heavy underbrush, that type of stuff. You can also use LiDAR. But here in Arizona, since we don't have that, we don't need to use LiDAR to be really looking at what the structures are. It's very, very open up here in this part of Arizona. As far as soil, most areas it's dust. And it's just, there's not a whole lot grows out there. But when you're coupling current visual aids along with the sensing equipment, it gives you a better idea. And what we have found thus far is really, it's enlightening. It's also intriguing to what new things we could see. Next slide, please. Here's the overview of the Macaulay Helium processing facility with the solar panels. Again, we put in the solar panels and the processing facility. The solar panels obviously take up more space than the entire facility because the entire facility fits into just a few 40-foot shipping containers. Next slide. Number 10 there on the MHPF, on our grand opening back in January, we had our illustrious crew there, and we can have a wide range of throughputs. Now, one of the ways that this plant has been built, it's been built to be able to, as the leader and as to actually be able to be moved. Maybe not this plant, but it could be. And other plants, we want these designed, they were designed specifically so we can take up the smallest footprint possible. That's a permanent footprint, so that once we're done and you remove everything, it's very easy. And these plants, since they are, they're not down the road mobile instantly, you can't hook up to them with a trailer and just drag them down the road, but they are in shipping containers, and so they can be moved. And that's one of the intriguing parts too, as far as going forward, what we've already previously stated in other previous press releases. What we're looking at doing is trying to go forward on a number of different areas. These plants are being designed so that we could, if you have an existing gas gathering system, you could actually plot this in right into it. So you don't have to deal with all the necessary liabilities of having additional well bores. And there's a lot of folks out there, I really think they will, as the helium shortage really deepens, they will find that you're not going to just be able to go out and find helium any place. And where you do, it's going to be in smaller amounts. So that's why these smaller containers like what we have developed here are really key and critical. These type of containers also, with the systems that we have built, we can get to 6 9s and a 5, which is normally just by doing PSA is really hard. And so it's a combination of PSA and other type of filtration. And normally to get to that higher level, you're doing a cryogenic unit. And it can be a flip of the coin for a specific given area as to exactly what is the efficacy of trying to create liquid helium. And so that's one of the things that we try to work with what's maximized in this area. On the next slide, just a little closer view of when it was inside the shop, the outside of it, and then on the inside, see, this was unfinished module, but there is over 2,000 feet. When it ends up, the one container, there's almost 3,000 feet of nickel steel tubing running around that. And so the way everything has to fit, and it also has been designed for long-term maintenance so that you can take things apart, get in and get out. So again, it's been designed to be moved, so it has to meet heavier construction qualities. And that type of stuff I'm proud of, because once we get through, we don't leave some huge footprint that takes up, just for the plant, that takes up a football field. Next slide, you see on slide 12 there, the Macaulay helium field, the discovery well, the helium wasn't as high as we had found in the initial wells, but yet it still shows the high nitrogen and very low hydrocarbon and very, very low CO2. On the offsetting wells, the CO2 was very minimal. So since nitrogen is basically 75% of what we breathe, we can vent that. And the other, so it makes it easier to capture things. Now, on this plant, CO2 is not it's extremely minimal. This plant has been designed, and how we can deal with that is also with amine units to drop off. So for future plants, if we're in an area that has, say, elevated levels of CO2, we can capture that and then clean it up and process it either for food grade or for just other oil field uses or other type of applications. On slide 13, you see the picture there of the mapping of, in general, where our lease holdings are. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see there's 3 ovals, and that's where the original Pentadome field was. And there's been some other folks trying to look at more of the bypass, shallow gas up there. And it's the overall problem with it in that area, it's under-pressured. It's for the depth that you would normally presume. Now, that doesn't mean you can't find it. Same way in our area. Some of our pressures are not what you would normally expect for, say, at 3,800 feet in a normal oil and gas well. They're not as high. So what it gets into is you can have porosity and permeability. Both are key critical functions to this. Now, you can have some areas, depending on the makeup, you may have, for this area, what you would consider to be 16% porosity, which would be considered good. And in some areas that might not be, but it's the ability for a gas to move through a medium. Try to help people out, try to understand this aspect. If you have 2 5-gallon buckets, one you fill with golf balls, the other one you fill with just coarse beach sand, and you drill a 1/4-inch hole in the bottom of each one. Pour a gallon of water through the bucket that has the golf balls. It's going to run through there faster than that same gallon of water going through the sand. And that's the ability. That just gives you a very simplified version of permeability. It's the ability of a fluid or gas to move through a medium. Moving on to slide 14, the Rolfing helium field, where we had our original discovery wells at, and we had more of a mixture of other noble gases in there. Now, if you're dealing with krypton, neon, and that type of stuff, and argon, it requires that little more processing to extract all that. And that's why we chose the Macaulay field to begin with, because that is, we thought it would be easier, and it has proven to be easier. Next slide, number 15, just to help folks give an idea on geological settings. There's anticlinal features, and if you think of a fold, and you don't want to be on the low spots on the synclines. You want to try to be on the top of the anticlines. And anticlines have one side that will be more fractured than the other. So you have to try to select understand how they were formed and get on the correct side of the anticline, and then find the type of traps that are in place to help hold the helium. So in number 16, in summary, we are looking to start producing, or actually start selling now, We have additional areas that we want to. There are most of our end users, whether we were here in Arizona or in another state, most of it is here in Arizona. You look at TSMC and Intel. Well, TSMC is building 3 more plants here in the northeast part of the valley, and they're putting in $40.9 billion to build those plants. And they have to have neon and helium to create that. Then the last slide, 17. What exactly is helium? Again, it comes from as I previously spoke, it comes from the breakdown. But what is the actual demand for it? You see here, MRIs, I think most of us, or at least I have, had a number of MRIs. And that is what cools the magnets when they're spinning up. And every time an MRI gets turned on, they lose a small amount of helium. So they have to be recharged. And there's actually in some areas where they're shutting down the older MRI, they're taking the helium out of that and they're processing and putting into the newer style MRIs, which don't have as much of a helium loss, but they require more. On slide 18, for domestic consumption, as you see, the bright blue in the upper right hand, MRIs comprise approximately a third of the total usage. And lifting gas has really gone down because it is so expensive. Other type of analytical and labs, there's been many laboratories in the US that have shut down recently, or they've had to curtail their research tremendously. Some of due to force majeure by the major suppliers for helium. Many companies have had their supplies reduced from 45 to 65%. So they just had to literally cut out entire projects that they maybe have been working on for a number of years. So then you get into, like this last week, we just had 2 more SpaceX launches, one from Vandenberg and one from Kennedy. So you get into more and more of these launches, and they all require helium for purging because it's stable, doesn't blow up, doesn't burn, but you've got to have that. Next slide, or actually go to slide 20. You look at natural gas withdrawals and production, and this gets back to what I touched on previously. Most helium has been produced from oil and gas. Well, you do not find helium in shale wells, and as looking at this chart, you can see where there has been, from 2015 to 2019, there's almost a 75% increase in gas production from shale. And you just don't have helium there. And the others have consistently dropped. So the supply is not increasing. It's only continued to drop. And the problems with Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine supplied approximately 70% of the world's supply of neon. That's off the market. And Russia was supplying a lot of the helium. So then try to take a guess when those conflicts will be resolved. So our ongoing market is not shrinking. It's continuing to grow. And that doesn't even touch into some of the newer type of stuff where TPUs or thermoplastic polyurethane, where they're using a mixture of nitrogen and helium so that when it's being made, they can reduce the weight and still maintain the structural fabric strength of the product they're trying to build. So with that, I will conclude, and please send in your questions and we will respond to them and get back to you folks. Thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.